event virtually from many different countries of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. Welcome all. This event is co-organized by the European-funded projects Atlanteco, the Mission Atlantic, and the Anchor Project in the framework of the Tara Microbiomes flagship mission, planned by Foundation Tara Ocean as part of the European Atlanteco project. A very special thanks goes to Ciência Viva that through Ana Noronha, the Executive Director, has kindly offered these excellent facilities. In these science to policy events, developed under the framework of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance, we will have the opportunity to listen to scientific presentations on the topic of marine ecosystems, which will be followed by a roundtable debate that should provide us with insights and guidelines for the next steps supporting and strengthening the cooperation for a sustainable use of Atlantic marine ecosystems. And now let's start the session, and I would like to invite Ana Noronha. Ana, please come onto the stage for the opening session. Thank you.
Well, welcome to the Pavilion of Knowledge here at Ciência Viva. We are very happy to receive all of you, friends of the Atlantic from pole to pole, all Atlantic, which was finally a reality. And now these projects are really showing how it is possible to create a real Atlantic community across the Atlantic without borders. So I welcome you all, those who are here and those who follow us online, just to tell that why I am particularly happy to be here today, because I am also I'm also involved in the Anchor project, and we have managed to set an all-Atlantic network of blue schools that is led by the University of São Paulo, and where the Portuguese program Escola Azul is also an important model. In fact, it has been the model because it started earlier. So we are very happy to contribute with this Portuguese experience that now is creating links across the Atlantic. Now, besides Brazil and South Africa and Cabo Verde, we also have Nigeria and, of course, Argentina. So it is really becoming all Atlantic as we want. So from pole to pole, and from the small kids to the grown-ups and the researchers, we are really starting to build this community. So I wish you all a good work here today and good results for your projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ana, for the welcoming words. And now I would like to call Professora Amélia Polónia, a member of the FCT Board of Directors, to come on the stage.
Good afternoon. It is for me a pleasure being here for this promising session and debate. In a more formal tone, dear colleagues, dear participants, dear Ana Noronha, Ciência Viva CEO Executive Director, who generously is hosting this event, may I start by welcoming you, participants of this debate, representatives of key project missions and entities focused on all Atlantic marine ecosystems. I wish you all a very productive session, and not the least, a pleasant stay in Lisbon. This is my main role here in this session, and I could just leave it at that. However, as FCT representative and as a researcher involved myself in the study of the human interaction with the oceans, I cannot help but bring up just a few topics that leave no doubts about the crucial importance of this debate. A debate that should and will be further expanded, as it is already, not only amongst scientists and policymakers, but also by including the social community. This is the reason, I would think, why Ciência Viva is hosting this event. That the ocean is a relevant ecosystem is nowadays undeniable and undisputable. It was not so some decades ago. The data gives evidence to its crucial role for the overall Earth systems and ecosystems. More than 70% of the planet's surface is covered by oceans, which hold about 97% of the water on Earth. About 70% of the oxygen we breathe is produced by the oceans. Nevertheless, we have only explored at about 5% of the world's oceans. There's a lot more to be discovered and studied. In addition, the ocean is home to rich biodiversity, acts a climate regulator, and offers food security. Due to an expanding global economy, the oceans are under increasing ecological pressure. Therefore, the need for a sustained use of marine resources is widely acknowledged at the national, European, and at international levels. The Portuguese National Sea Strategy, the European Marine Strategy Framework Directive, and more widely, the European Green Deal Goal 14 of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, side by side with the UN Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development Strategy, provide clear example and evidence of that. The call for the commitment of the scientific community is urgent. What is called for is a healthy and active collaboration to better understand the ocean by the upcoming of truly interdisciplinary projects of research. As for the Atlantic Ocean, the sustainable use of marine resources is being handled at the European level by the Atlantic Strategy and its action plan, and at the international level by the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. In fact, we are here today within the scope of this alliance, a science and diplomacy effort that currently links the European Union and 7 Atlantic countries, to which Portugal has been actively contributing through the participation of research teams in European-funded projects. FCT, for instance, and as you know, is responsible for coordinating the Anchor CSA project through the network developed within the scope of the AIR Center. The motto of the Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance, Connect, Cooperate, Act, has proven to be very effective. More and new knowledge is always welcome and needed, but there is already a vast knowledge that needs to be connected and acted upon. The 7 European projects under the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance flagship call of Horizon 2020, 3 of them represented today here, Anchor, Atlantic Echo, and Mission Atlantic, and there are many twin projects, as well as the working groups and joint pilot actions in scope of Anchor, 2 of them also present here today, focusing on capacity building and sharing of research infrastructures. They provide very good example of stakeholders' connection, stakeholders' active engagement, and the concrete outcomes based on synergies and existing initiatives across and along the Atlantic Ocean. Still, To best unlock the secrets and the sustainability management of the ocean as a whole, cooperation is required, with the policymakers and with the overall community intervening at the coastal and ocean level. More literacy of the oceans is key and instrumental to efficiently achieving the development global goals in a sustainable way. FCT, as the Portuguese founding agency for science and technology, could not stay away from these concerns and goals. The idea of bringing together and systematically connecting all the relevant actors in ocean issues, scientists, stakeholders, data, knowledge, expertise, capacities, social communities and resources is part of FCT's mission. In this regard, and at the national level, FCT supports, through its different funding mechanisms, 7 research and innovation units, 3 associated laboratories, and 6 research infrastructures, fully engaged with marine research activities. FCT also recognized 4 collaborative laboratories dedicated to ocean marine research, one of them dedicated to the Atlantic Ocean, the Plus Atlantic. All these research infrastructures and projects are expected to be connected within the All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance, as the Atlantic Ocean and the Atlantic coastlines are one of Portugal's major assets. At the international level, FCT supports Portuguese research teams in their participation in international consortia, either through the joint programming initiative Healthy and Productive Seas and Oceans, or through the EU co-funded calls. Bilateral agreements with other funding agencies. Currently, we have bilateral agreements with some African, South American, and European Atlantic countries are also an excellent opportunity to support national research teams and stand as a main mechanism to explore in the scope of the All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance. Both the scientific presentations and roundtable debate foreseen in this afternoon program are expected to provide guidelines for the next steps, supporting strengthened cooperation for a sustainable use of the Atlantic marine ecosystems, and I am sure they will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Amelia. And now it is time to move to the first section of this event, where we will have the opportunity to listen to 3 scientific presentations by 3 researchers. And we will start with Hugo Sarmento. Hugo, welcome. Hugo is a biologist and holds a PhD in ecology. Hugo is currently a professor at the University Federal de São Carlos in Brazil and develops research on the ecology, structure, and functions of the aquatic microbiomes. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the introductions. I'm very happy to be here. Let me start, before I start my talk, I will spend 1 minute telling you a short story. While I was a postdoc in 2008, maybe, I was a FCT grant in Barcelona. And when a journalist came to one of these TV shows for Portuguese abroad, and she asked me, what are your dreams for your career? And I said innocently that I would dream to have a boat that sails to Brazil and Africa and Portugal to make students to learn oceanography. And now, 10 years later, it's really a pleasure. It means a lot to be. It means a lot to me to be here in an initiative like this, and to be part of the All Atlantic community. It's really a dream come true. So I'll talk you a little bit about the Atlanteco project, and specifically of this part of the research that we did in the Amazon plume. So observing the ocean, as we know, everybody probably has heard, is made thanks to international collaboration to maintain equipments like this. These are buoys that send us data every day that are very, very important for human activities on land, to predict the weather forecasts, and many other economic activities. And it's only possible thanks to the international collaboration, like the projects that were funded in the whole Atlantic. And now we know that the ocean physics, the ocean is moving all the time in very complex ways. And thanks to these systems, we can make these models, physical models of the ocean moving around. Differently to forests, where the nutrients come from the soils to the leaves to make photosynthesis, in the ocean, the photosynthesis is made by microorganisms, is the ocean microbiome. And the nutrients come from these movements of the water, and also by remineralization, by bacteria, for example. This is how the half of the oxygen that is produced on the planet is done on the ocean, is the hidden forests, okay? So the microbiome makes the link between the weather and the fisheries, for example, because it's also the food of all the fish and all the food webs. That's what we study in Atlanteco, mostly, and we use DNA sequencing mostly for that, new technologies of sequencing DNA. So the microbiome, the ocean microbiome is this bunch of microbes that live in the ocean. Every drop of ocean has thousands of microorganisms that interact with each other to make the whole thing function. It's called the microbiome. So the microbes are important also for us, for humans. As we said, half of the oxygen produced in the ocean by the microbiome. The ocean is a carbon sink. It regulates climate, supports ocean life through the food webs, for example, and many other ecosystem services can be listed here. So ultimately, all the food that we eat comes from all the seafood comes from the microbiome. And as I said, it's a link between the climate and trophic levels. In Atlanteco, we also study plastics and the microorganisms that live on plastics. It's a new reality to the ocean. All the quantity of plastics that arrive to the ocean, it gets broken in small pieces. It's colonized by microbes. This is a new support of life for microbes. Microbes that live on surfaces are very different from those that live in the free water. So, and it also gets to the size of plankton, the plastic, and then can be ingested and get into the food web. So we also study this pillar of research in Atlanteco. So one of the things we've been doing is gathering all the existing data on the Atlantic. We make these observations that are mapped here. We have a huge database now, the Atlanteco base. And you see that there are gaps, especially in the equatorial and southern ocean here. So we try to fill those gaps with new sampling flagships, one of them with a Tara schooner that went along the coast of Brazil, and that's what I will present very briefly right now. So I'm going to talk about this part of the mission microbiome. Did all this tour here, and now it's arrived to Lisbon yesterday. And we named it as Sigrid Neumann Leitão, a Brazilian researcher that contributed a lot to the oceanography of the region. So when you think about estuaries, this is what we typically have. With tides, the ocean enters into the river. The salty water is heavier than the fresh water, so it enters from the bottom. And the rivers that came full of particles usually sediment in this region, making these sandbars, okay? Barras in Portuguese. So I chose my home city picture to illustrate this. This is Oporto. You see the sand here accumulating. Well, of course, the Amazon is very different from this. One of the reasons is the size. I picked this old picture from Scioli that shows the Mississippi Channel and the Amazon Channel. And this is near Óbidos, it's 1,000 kilometers away from the estuary. So it's very big and it's a lot of water. So the difference is that you are 300 kilometers away from the coast and you still are in fresh waters. It's really a lot of water that pushes the ocean away. You're not you don't see the land and the ocean comes in and out. It's really a massive amount of fresh water that pushes the ocean away. As you see in the images, this is salinity. The blue is the fresh water coming out, and it changes seasonally. So, oops, let's see. Okay. So we have these letters here are names of ocean currents. The NBC is the North Brazilian current, is one of the strongest currents in the world, and is literally broken by the strength of the water in some months. As you see in this image, it gets, we call this a retroflexion. It comes back because of the strength of, it's so much fresh water that it breaks this current. The microbiome of the Amazon is very different from everything that we know. This is metagenome sequences, is DNA sequencing from soils, from other rivers, and you see that the Amazon is very apart. That means that the microbiome is very specific, and this is mostly the freshwater microbiome. So, and this is what happens in the Amazon plume is a hotspot of not only for the microbiome, but also for the carbon sink, for example. You have a lot of biological processes coming in because you have some nutrients inputs. The plume goes mostly on surface, and then you get a lot of nitrogen fixation and like a succession of different microorganisms along the plume. So this is the team that went on board of Tara. Oh, these were flags. Now it's changed by letters, but that's okay. You see that this is the crew, mostly French, but very international teams. A lot of PhDs and postdocs from Brazil. It's an important aspect of the project is the capacity building. So we send these drifters that we can know where the water is going, and we also, at the same time, had a group of many scientists around the world reading the maps every day that we received online to decide and guide the boats to where to go to sample, because it's huge and it takes a lot of time to get to that place where something special is happening. So we have this kind of tools to guide the boat. These were the sampling points, and we adapted the sampling strategies according to what we wanted to see. This is our different depths. We sample different depths. We measure several things, and I'll show you some pictures of the work that we've done. We have a very sophisticated system of labeling the samples with barcodes, because the samples go throughout the world to different labs to be analyzed, so we have a very sophisticated system for that. We have several different types of samples that we take depending on the organism that we're studying. We take pumps, we take nets, very different depths and very different volumes depending on the concentration of the organisms on the water. And we feel this is filtration systems on board of Tara. Most of the work is filtering water to concentrate the organisms, to then sequence the DNA. This is an example of the filters. In the Amazon, it gets brown. We also get a lot of sargassum. We have some reports that the sargassum is increasing and is reaching new sites on the Caribbean Sea, but nobody really knows where it comes from and why this is happening. So we took a lot of samples for that also. And yes, there is plastic in the Amazon as well. I don't know if you were surprised, but there's a lot of plastic in the Amazon River. There are cities in the river. And we saw it also in samples that we had from Congo River. There's a lot of plastics in those rivers as well, which is quite unexpected, maybe. And these are some images of live recording of salinity of the track we made. You see blue is freshwater, and the more yellow is more salinity. So you see that we went to the plume here. The same for temperature. The temperature changes as well. And this is the CO2, as I told you. Most people think about the Amazon as the lungs of the planet, but actually the same amount of carbon that is fixed every day by the forest is emitted by the freshwaters. The bacteria in the river respire all the organic matter and emit the same amount of CO2 as the forest absorbs. But so there are some suggestions to include in the Amazon system also the plume, because here you have a lot of carbon being injected into being absorbed and sinking into the ocean. In blue, where you see here around the plume, is a hot spot of carbon sink. So there have been some suggestions of including that into the budgets. And some pictures of the blue waters of the ocean, so you can see the contrasts. This is the plume, intermediate part of the plume. This is another flagship from Mission Atlantic, I guess, another sister project. We could go together and make sampling, complementary sampling in both boats. It was very nice. And this is the Amazon waters, brown, which is quite challenging to sample because you have a lot of particles, so filtering this water is quite complicated. We had to adapt a lot of protocols for this. There are some movies for you to see the nets. The difference of sampling the ocean and the river is totally different. So I don't know if I'm on time. It's okay? It's okay. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Hugo. It was a really nice presentation. And now we will continue with the presentation by Emma Rock, a marine microbiologist with a PhD in marine microbial ecology. Welcome, Emma. Emma's current research focuses on the structure and function of the Benguela upwelling and Angulhas Bank microbiome. And Emma is currently working as a research fellow at University of Cape Town in South Africa. And she's a researcher from the EU Atlanteco project. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Great. And thank you, Hugo, for kicking that off. You've done a lot of good explanations of what a microbiome is and how important they are, so I don't have to go over that again. You can all keep that image in your brain as I cover this part of the presentation. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about what we're doing in Cape Town, what we have been doing in Cape Town, studying the Benguela upwelling, and how that led to Atlanteco and what we did on Terra from Cape Town to Walvis Bay and beyond. So what have we been studying for the past, I think 6 years ago, I came to University of Cape Town as a postdoc. And virtually, as far as the southern, so I talk about the southern Benguela upwelling system, virtually nothing had been done as far as microbiome studies there. There had been a study, I think, done 20 years ago, old-fashioned way of looking at microbiomes. As far as DNA sequencing and flow cytometry, virtually nothing had been done. So we started from scratch. We're very interested in this system. It obviously, we wanted to look at the community structure. The microbiome is integral for carbon export, so we're interested in that as well. And ultimately, we want to put together a sort of suite of microbiome indicators that can indicate ocean health in this region. Why? As we know, this is one of the most important and strong upwelling regions in the world. And that leads to a global reservoir of carbon, reaching everywhere from the microbiome all the way up to sea mammals. So how have we been doing this? We've been working within South Africa, with the government of South Africa. We've been using their vessels to get out and get samples and get them processed. And that led us to Atlanteco, where we were fortunate enough to board Tara and do a full suite of Tara protocols. So what do we know so far? I'm not going to go into any of these figures in too much detail. Zimkita Gebe was one of our PhD students who used flow cytometry. We were lucky enough to get on board the RV Algoa, who is a vessel from the Department of Fisheries and Forestries and Environment in Cape Town. They go out seasonally, 4 times a year, and they do 44 stations in 10 days. So it's a monitoring cruise. They go out 4 times a year, so for us that was great. There was good spatial resolution there and good temporal resolution. So we were lucky enough to get both space. 5, 6 years ago, we both went on board and took the samples that we could take at the time with the infrastructure that we had. So Zim was able to do her PhD. She is now working at the government on this boat, which is great. Nicole Dames is our PhD student, now come postdoc. She was also on Tara with us, and she was able to do a little bit of metagenome work, where we discovered there's a lot of denitrification happening, at least in the southern Benguela. That was the green signal that you see there. And then we did a lot of amplicon work, just spatially and temporally, to get a baseline idea of what is there, and who is there, and when they're there. So that set the scene for Atlanteco, which was, I can echo Hugo's sentiments. It's a dream come true for us to be able to work not just within Africa and build capacity in Africa, but also work with other countries as well. So we embarked on Tara in Cape Town. It's the Shackleton expedition. We named it after Leslie Shackleton, who has been a huge influence, was a huge influence in the southern Benguela as far as women empowerment and higher education. And ultimately, we were interested in expanding our base. So we knew a little bit about the southern Benguela. We were able to go up into the northern Benguela. Now, it's important to note the Benguela upwelling is split into 2 systems. There's the northern Benguela, the NBUS, the northern Benguela upwelling system, and the SBUS, which is the southern Benguela upwelling system. The southern Benguela upwelling system is a seasonal upwelling. So every summer, we get these strong southeasterly winds that pulse every 7 to 9 days, and then they stop over winter. We get stratified waters. In the northern Benguela upwelling system in Namibia, it's year-round. So we get these pulses, but it doesn't stop. So it's 2 very, very different systems, and it's important we're able to compare those. So that was a good, big focus of the Tara expedition. We positioned our stations in a way that it overlapped with not just monitoring stations, as I showed you in the previous slide from the South African cruises, but Namibia also do have monitoring cruises, and we wanted as much as possible to overlap with those so we can go back and resample. And so we're collaborating with the Namibian government so that we can use their vessels to go back and use similar methods to sample again, so that we have a temporal resolution as well as just a spatial one. So that was the strategy behind our stations. As far as the transects go, we had an inshore station, which was freshly upwelled water. We had a sort of shelf station, which is sort of modified upwelled, and then an off-shelf station for each one of these transects. Another focus was the Orange River. Of course, we're looking at plastics. Interestingly, we didn't see any big plastics, but there's no doubt microplastics there, which we will find out later on when we process our samples. And we're obviously interested, there's a lot of mining activity in Namibia, so therefore a lot of trace metal input through this river, and how that's affecting productivity is something we'd like to focus on as well. Moving further north, there was a few Namib desert transects. I'll show a few preliminary results from that as well, which is interesting. We have University of Stellenbosch, a university close to us. There was a PhD thesis focusing on bioavailable trace metals coming from the dust from the Namib desert, and there's an increased amount of iron and manganese coming from there. So that's something we're also going to look and see how that's affecting productivity. And last but not least, we want to look at the oxygen minimum zones. So with this high productivity that Hugo talked about in his presentation, inevitably there's respiration, as he talked about, at depth, and that sucks the oxygen out of the depth of the water, and then we end up with problems there as well. So we wanted to, which that does happen all along the coast, so we wanted to focus on that as well. So diving slightly deeper into the low oxygen zone story, because this is a big part of what we wanted to focus on, we did bring a few extra protocols on board Tara. We looked at primary production. We were interested in how much carbon actually is being sequestered by all of this productivity. We also looked at nitrogen uptake. So nitrogen is a key nutrient for phytoplankton to bloom. And there's evidence in the southern Benguela that it's limiting. And there's a deficit there. So we're trying to figure out the math. We're working alongside Dr. Sarah Fawcett and her group at the University of Cape Town, who's a biogeochemist, and working very closely with her to try and resolve this question. So as we know, microbes, and as Hugo pointed out, they respire oxygen and create CO2 at depth. So this is what the microbes do when these blooms sink. Now, ultimately, when you've got such big blooms, there'll be no oxygen left, and then they start to respire nitrogen. So one, this is a problem because there's less nitrogen available for these phytoplankton to grow. And two, that will start to create not just CO2, but really potent greenhouse gases such as nitrous oxide. And that becomes a worry. So nitrous oxide is also known as laughing gas. Not a laughing matter. Why? Nitrous oxide is about 265, 300 times more potent than CO2. Yet very little is known. It's a very tricky gas to study. We did sample it on Terra, and we've still got colleagues still analyzing it. It's not trivial. But it's essential that we understand what's going on. So these gases have been increasing steadily since the 1980s, and this graph just comes from 2000, but it goes back further than that. And 22% of this is coming from the ocean. So we really need to understand, and microbes are the ones creating this gas. So we really want to understand who they are and how much of this gas is being produced and what's happening to it. Is it going into the atmosphere, or is it staying in the ocean, and what's happening to it? So thanks to Sina Waltrus, who is one of Sarah's PhD students. So we did on Terra, we did measure this. I was hoping to get some results for you today. Like I said, it's a tricky thing to do, so we've not quite got it for today. But this is results from 2017 that were taken from that exact same first station that we sampled on Tara. So I imagine our results will look a little bit like this. And there is, of course, nitrous oxide. There's little to no oxygen at depth, and so nitrous oxide is being produced. So we have a number here. What does that number mean? If you were to do the calculations of sea to air flux, it varies between 0 to 9 micromolars. Now, if you compare that to Peru, between 400 and 1,800, which is huge, it falls within the range of the northern Benguela, which we'll get an idea later on when we process our samples. So it's not that high, the sea to air flux, which poses the question of perhaps there are microbes. We do know there are microbes that can consume N2O, and this is something that we'll find out when we process our samples. So the Shackleton leg, we left May 3rd from Cape Town, arrived in Walvis Bay on the 31st of May. The far right is a temperature plot. So you can see, obviously, there's very cold waters inshore, and that's indicating strong upwelling. And we drifted our way, mostly, up the Benguela to sample the Benguela. It was quite nice, so very little fuel consumed. You can see that very dark blue, don't know if there's a laser, there's no laser on here. That dark blue portion represents the Lüderitz upwelling, which is one of the strongest upwelling, I'll go more quickly, regions in the world. Ultimately, we sampled everywhere we wanted to sample in different levels of upwelling, so we were happy. This was station 1. I think that the one takeaway message from this was the McLean pump, which we brought on board. This is a filtration unit that filters water in situ. So we were able to use that at that station. Very, very, very productive, very high level of phytoplankton in the station. We also collected many locusts in the manta net from the Namib Desert. So we definitely collected dust there as well, and very large diatoms, almost a millimeter big in the Walvis Ridge area, and so we're very interested to see that. That poses more questions as far as science is concerned. Wanted to quickly touch on the benthic. So the benthic component will take place next year by Namona, who is a Namibian PhD student who will work at UCT. She'll start next year. She's coincidentally the poster girl for this event, I think, as well. And she'll focus on the benthic pelagic coupling aspect of these same stations. There's a few photos from the leg, final Clyde. So when we arrived in Walvis Bay, we met up with the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources in Walvis Bay, where we did a sort of capacity building training of the scientists there, so they were able to understand some of the protocols that happen on Terra, and we decided on which ones they would like to adapt onto their vessels, that's an ongoing relationship that we're working with them on that. We're also touching base with the National Institute for Fisheries and Marine Research in Angola. So these are outreach activities and capacity building activities that are ongoing, moving into the future. And finally, we have got Terra protocols now on the Algoa going out on these seasonal cruises. So we have very efficient filtering protocols, which is solving a lot of our logistical issues that we previously had when going out on this vessel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And now we will finish this round of presentations with Patricio Mariani, who is joining us online. Patricio has a Master in Marine Environmental Science and a PhD in Marine Science and Engineering. Patricio is currently a professor in ocean technology and leads the group on observation technology at Technical University of Denmark. And he is the coordinator of the EU project Mission Atlantic. Welcome, Patricio.
Thank you everyone. I hope you can hear me well, and it's really a pity not to be there with you today in Lisbon for this today event, but also I know that there are a series of events planned for this week in connection with the General Assembly of Atlantico that makes the week very interesting. So a pity, but and thanks also for the opportunity to give me the chance to say something about the science underpinning the project that I'm coordinating, which is Mission Atlantic. And I was thinking about how to convey the message, the way we address this, the complex interactions in marine ecosystems to provide support to management decisions. And I'd like to start with a general consideration that maybe everyone is familiar with, that we are indeed living in an area of multiple crises, from the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, but also increasing geopolitical tensions and all the linked economic, financial, and social crises. This, of course, is a challenging period, but maybe also an opportunity to start thinking in a more systemic way, that all these components are indeed linked in a network of dynamic interactions, and that's the way we need to address them, not in isolations, but all together. And that resembles some similarity with the fish school that I'm showing here. So those are also agents with some sort of complex interactions in between, and we need to understand how the dynamic of the individuals will affect the dynamic of the whole system. Let's see if the next slide here works. Yeah, it seems it works. That's pretty much actually what Mission Atlantic is about. Try to put all these elements together and address them in a systemic way, or a so-called holistic approach to marine ecosystems. So moving basically from what we call single pressure, single subject in marine ecosystem, like for example, what is the effect of oil and gas extraction on the population of seals. Then, I mean, we should also consider that we want to go beyond the single pressure and the multiple subject. That's also something that has been done before. So specific human activities that creates one specific pressures, and then we want to see how the marine ecosystem will react to that. In Mission Atlantic, we actually do for the multiple pressure and multiple subjects. And of course, this is the base also of what is called the ecosystem-based approach to marine ecosystem, or ecosystem-based approach to management as well. And of course, it's a challenge because many of these elements maybe we have no much knowledge about, or we have some limited knowledge. All the information coming in terms of how these elements, these human activities, these pressures and these ecosystem components are connected, they come with their own uncertainties and data gap as well. So what we do in Mission Atlantic, we then use this framework to address this problem, which is called integrated ecosystem assessment, where all these pressures and human activities and ecosystem components are taken together. And to do that, we go through a specific number of steps. The first one is so-called scoping. So try to understand, map out these interactions. And of course, we do that at regional level and try to scale it up at the all Atlantic scale. So this initial phase of scoping, actually the main product is a conceptual model of how these interactions are working in specific regions. Then from these linkages between human activities, pressures, and ecosystem components, we need to derive indicators of ecosystem state. So what if we change a pressure? What will happen to the specific ecosystem component? So do we have data for that? Can we analyze these dynamics, maybe using time series analysis tools? After that, we have a risk and vulnerability assessment. So given that now we have some indicator that is able to reproduce some of the dynamic of the ecosystem state, can we understand if we are close to critical transitions in ecosystems, either so-called tipping points or anyway a change of the equilibrium of many of the ecosystem components? Finally, we also have activities in terms of scenarios. So either scenarios in terms of what if something happened, but also future scenarios using numerical models and different climate and socio-economic pathways or socio-economic scenarios. So that's pretty much what Mission Atlantic is about, and it does that in close collaborations with stakeholders at different levels in terms of validation of the results, but also in terms of informing the process with some of the, where, for example, we have data gap on some specific processes. We can use expert knowledge in terms of filling that gap, at least using that expert knowledge, of course with some uncertainties, but we need to have methods, statistical tools that are able to handle both case studies where we have a lot of data and case studies where we have a data poor situation. So we do that across the All Atlantic. We have 7 case studies where we focus on, and we try to make a synthesis also at the All Atlantic scale. We'll not spend too much time on detailing the kind of dynamic across these different case studies, but one of the exercises we did was the scoping one, and this is the type of table we produce. You can see the sectors are listed, the specific pressures, and the ecosystem components. This is basically a map across all these case studies of what we have in terms of results for now, in terms of this mapping. Then, of course, the exercise is about to link them, how these sectors and pressures are linked, and how the pressures are impacting different ecosystem components. If we put all the results we have got for all the case studies on this map, we get this very complicated map. But I mean, complexity is part of what we have to deal with. I mean, we cannot just hide it and work on a specific linkages and forget about the rest. Because it's important to address both the direct effect from some specific activity into an ecosystem component, but also all the indirect effects throughout this connection. And going into the indicators part, I mean, what ideally we would like to find is to characterize these linkages with data, with knowledge about how the connections between the pressure and ecosystem component is actually modifying a specific indicators, which is also an expression of the ecosystem state. So let's say we have an ecosystem indicator that has some sort of dynamic over time. We can see the past dynamic. We can see that the present state of that indicator is a given value. And then maybe with future scenarios, we can actually see how this indicator will change over time. And of course, the quality of this indicator or the value of the indicator and how this corresponds to good quality or good status or bad status, it's a discussion that it's a threshold that has to be taken together with this in discussion with stakeholders, relevant stakeholders. But we have done some of this across all the case studies. I'm not going into the details of all the trends we have seen that, but we have collected a lot of data across all these sectors that are mapped here now for the specific case study in Norwegian seas. We have the same for the pressures. So, and there, of course, there are linkages between these economic activities or human activities in the area that are relevant for marine ecosystems and the pressures, and also for all the ecosystem components. So we have collected all this data and started doing some statistical analysis of that. One of the things that we do is also try to identify the trends and the changes, the relative changes in these dynamics for each of these single indicators. And one way to map them out is, for example, here. So you have here like the different percentile of the dynamic. I mean, in which part of the or in which region of the dynamic we are. I mean, if we are in an extreme event, let's say, or if we are in kind of a normal trend of the indicator. And we can map this, like, for example, I think in this case, can't see my slide, but I think the yellow is a lower region, and the blue is a high percentile, or the other way around. But what you can see here is basically there is, in this case, like a correlation between some of the ecological indicators that are changing, most likely decreasing, while some of the human activities are actually changing as well in a similar way, but in an opposite trend. So this type of trend analysis and also the indicator analysis is then where we are now. And of course, we can do that when we have a lot of data. But in many of the regions that we want to apply these statistical tools, we don't have that many data on all the things we would like. So what we do then for filling this data gap, one of the things we could do, of course, is to benefit of all the Tara Ocean data once they are all processed. I mean, we can introduce them in filling some of these knowledge gap that we have at the moment. The other way is to set up so-called process-based numerical models. And we have a lot of activities on different type of ocean circulations models and so-called end-to-end ecosystem models with all the major ecosystem components described. And we run those models on a global scale. So we will have huge amount of data to look at, not only for the Atlantic, but actually globally. Let's see, yeah. I think I got stuck. Okay, yeah, I can skip this one to save time. The last step of the integrated ecosystem assessment is this vulnerability risk analysis, which we have not yet approached in a fully quantitative way, but it's basically trying, once we have characterized these linkages and we know a little bit about their dynamic, is try to address what are the risks related to a rapid change in one of these indicators, where the ecosystem specific component or the whole set of the components characterizing the region will go and will move. And of course, we are trying to link this to specific indicators that I've used, like the Marine Strategy Framework directives, try to analyze some of these dynamics also in the context of these indicators in order to have a close linkages between the science we produce and the policy decisions that have to be taken. That's pretty much it, and that's what I want to show. Of course, this is quite a big endeavor that involves a lot of partners. We are actually having the General Assembly of Mission Atlantic in a couple of weeks, so there will be more information and possibly also some policy event organized in the region, because we think that, I mean, many of these issues have to be discussed at regional level to fully appreciate and understand the impact that they can have on supporting policy. But thanks for now, that's all.
Thank you very much, Patricio. And now it is time for a coffee break. So we are a bit delayed. Let's be here at 3:50, 10 minutes to 4. Thank you, see you. Welcome back, everyone. So we'll now proceed with a roundtable debate entitled All Atlantic Vision, Scientific Challenges, Way Forward. This debate should provide some insights on ways to move forward, supporting the cooperation for a sustainable use of the Atlantic marine ecosystems. This debate will be moderated by Telmo Carvalho. Telmo is a member of the executive board of IPMA, the Portuguese Institute for the Sea and the Atmosphere, and Telmo has an extensive knowledge of ocean governance issues. So I call Telmo to start this session. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. Let me start thanking the organizers of this conference for the invitation, and I will immediately follow to presenting the panelists for this roundtable. I will introduce each one, and each one, after the introduction, can come up. So I think it's easier for you to identify the people. I call first Daniel Ludicone. Daniel is a physicist, a senior researcher at Stazione Zoologica Anton Dohrn in Naples, Italy, with experience in physical oceanography and in leading multidisciplinary studies in marine ecology. His main interests are the structure and functioning of the oceanic ecosystem and their relation with the ocean physics. He coordinates the EU project Atlanteco, and he has co-directed the Tara Mission Microbiomes expedition across the South Atlantic between 2020 and 2022. He is one of the coordinators of the Tara Oceans Consortium. He participates to the International Advisory Board of the new Dongshan Shuai Marine Station of Xiamen University. Chinese is difficult. And of the EMBRC in France. He is a member of the G7 Working Group on the Future of Seas and the Oceans. Thank you. I call now Sofia Cordeiro from the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology in Portugal. Sofia Cordeiro is deeply involved in science diplomacy activities in the Atlantic Basin, being the coordinator of the H2020 project Anchor CSA, aimed at supporting the implementation of the Belém Statement and therefore the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. Sofia is also the coordinator of the Ocean Program of the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology, where she maximizes the dialogue among the different scientific communities that are part of the ocean transdisciplinary area. I call now André Abreu from the Foundation Tara Ocean. André is the head of the International Policy Unit of the Tara Ocean Foundation. He studied philosophy and social communication in Rio de Janeiro with a specialization in international relations and economic development in Sorbonne, Paris. With more than 20 years of experience working in international cooperation in the domain of environmental issues, he joined the France Liberté Foundation in Paris in 2003, where he worked for 6 years with participations in the UN Human Rights Council. In 2010, he joined the Tara Ocean Foundation, taking in charge international policy and coordination, working since then in the international policy issues and international scientific cooperation. That's why we all know them. I call now, I think, online Werner Eckau. Hi, Werner, you're there. Dr. Werner is a fishery biologist trained at Bochum, Hamburg, and Kiel universities. He worked in Antarctica, Argentina, and the Azores since 1991. He worked on fish biology and ecology in tropical ecosystems. He's a member of the group of experts on capacity development of IOC Commission of UNESCO, and has been director of the Operational Center Germany of IOI, the International Ocean Institute. From 2004 to 2017, he was member and chair of the Committee of Directors of IOI. We all know him also from his participation in European projects, namely in the Anchor project, in the Traffic project, Traffic Transfer Efficiency in the Benguela Current, and the our project, Ecosystem Approach to the Management of Fisheries and the Marine Environment in West African Waters. Thank you, Werner. I call now José Moutinho from the Air Center, Atlantic International Research Center, also a co-leader of the Joint Pilot Action of AAA Marinet. He's a biologist with a bachelor degree in zoology from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro in 1981. In 1988, he graduated as an architect, so a multifunctional man. And of course, he also in Rio de Janeiro, but he had the equivalence conferred also through the Technical University of Lisbon. He has a Master of Science in Engineering and Technology Management from the Instituto Institute of Innovation, Technology and Development Policies here in Portugal. He's currently the Chief Business and Network Officer from the Atlantic International Research Center, the AIR Center. I call now Susana Catita from the Centro Ciência LP Portugal. Susana Catita has an advanced academic training in social sciences, particularly in sociology and international relations. She has several years of professional experience in higher education and science diplomacy, and she is the executive director of the Ciência LP Center. It's a center that is a category 2 category of UNESCO, and the center aims to enhance and reinforce advanced training and scientific development, especially in the Portuguese-speaking countries. And mainly those in Africa, within the scope of UNESCO values and in line with the SDGs of the United Nations 2030 agenda. The Ciência LP Center operates taking advantage and strengthening synergies already present in the local academic and scientific communities and projecting them in a global scientific space. The next speaker will be Alessandro Mas, from the Center for Mathematical Modeling and Center for Genome Regulation. Alessandro Mas is a mathematical engineer at the University of Chile. In '94 in France, at the Institute of Mathematics, the Lumineux, oh, now I have to change to French, of Université Aix-Marseille. In Marseille, he obtained the PhD degree. In 2000, he joined the newly created Center of Mathematical Modeling at the University of Chile. And since then, he has been conducting fundamental and applied research in both ergodic theory and systems biology. In 2002, he created the Laboratory of Bioinformatics and Mathematics of the Genome at CMM. In 2009, he entered as a member of the Chilean Academy of Engineering, and in 2018 was elected as corresponding member of the Chilean Academy of Science. In 2009, he received the Latin American Caribbean Mathematical Union Prize, and during his professional career, he has assumed different scientific responsibilities, like president of the Chilean National Council of Science, responsible for the Chilean-French Cooperation Program, chairman of the Department of Mathematical Engineering at the University of Chile, director of the Center of Mathematical Modeling. His work in stimulating scientific cooperation with France was recognized with the distinction Chevalier de l'Ordre National de Mérite. Thank you, Alessandro, for being here and joining us. I think also online we have, again, Patricio. Thank you, Patricio. I will skip your presentation because you already presented and we can start the discussion now, okay? So I think we have a panel here that will bring different scopes. I imagine that some will be more scientific, others more in terms of promoting the collaboration in this specific area of knowing and managing marine ecosystems. So my first question, I think I would start by a scientific question to Daniel. Daniel, the issue here is having in mind one of the recognized grand challenges in marine ecosystems, that is managing the sea using the ecosystem approach and spatial planning, and what we saw previously gives input to all that system of, to all that concept of ecosystem management. Could you tell us why this approach is crucial for people and societies, and how your projects and initiatives, or several projects and initiatives, are contributing to achieve that purpose? I think you need to connect it.
Hello. So thank you for organizing this and inviting us. So there are many challenges, as you were saying, in managing, in a way, the marine and oceanic ecosystems, and this is important for society for many reasons. Reasons are related directly to the need to protect nature as a value, per se, but also to because of the many ecosystem services provided by the oceans. So it can be the support to the human being through providing proteins, through fisheries and aquaculture, can be other kind of indirect services like supporting tourism and the water quality, but also directly impacting human health, because you can have a toxic algae, for instance. And also, as we know, it's one of the main regulators of the climate on this planet. So it's really important to know the functioning of those ecosystems and also to learn how to manage them sustainably. In this context, the challenge we went through, or we decided to deal with our project is actually a very specific challenge in a way. That is, managing an ecosystem made of organisms means also to have a not only good understanding of the oceanography, so I'm a physical oceanographer, of the ecology of the system, but also of the biology of the organism. So if we really want to understand and then manage these ecosystems, we really have to have a deep understanding of the biological properties and the metabolic states of these organisms. And in that sense, with our project, learning upon the experience with Tara Oceans before, we were trying to use the approach that we are now using in human health. That is understanding the biology of the humans through, for instance, the understanding of the DNA that is beared by the humans, the understanding of the function of different genes. We are basically copying this approach and exporting this approach to assess and manage the health of the oceans. This, I would say, if I have to synthesize in a few words, what is specific our project, I would say this is introducing into marine ecology and management advanced biological concepts and tools. In this regard, is very important, and this is an associated challenge, is the formation training, because the community, the marine science community, is not necessarily ready for this revolution, which implies knowing also a lot of new concepts and also new skills like bioinformatics, big data science, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So in short, one challenge we are dealing with, and which is revealing a big challenge, is what is called capacity building. I don't really like the expression, but let's say this training, right? So we will talk about this later, but I would say these are the main things.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, that's from a researcher perspective. Let me pass now to Sophia and try to understand how, from a science manager perspective, we could work together on that. So, Sophia, could you share with us your vision of addressing the grand challenges facing the ocean, and in particular, the role of national agencies that you represent? What role do you see for partnerships, and what has FCT and the Portuguese authorities been doing in promoting the same, especially in the Atlantic area?
Thank you, Telmo. So what Daniel has said about the importance of the ocean, I will not add to that. I will just add that in addition to integration among the different disciplines, we need coordination. Coordination among the different institutions that are on the field, also coordination among the different institutions that fund science, coordination among the different institutions that develop policies. So all this coordination is very important, but any of these can be developed by a single institution or even by a single country. So we really need cooperation, and we really need these partnerships. So we might think when we look to the SDGs in the Agenda 2030, there is a specific SDG for partnerships. In fact, partnerships are the basis of everything that we need to do to coordinate our efforts. There is a lot of knowledge out there already. It's always good to have more, of course, but what we really need to work on is partnering in order to make that knowledge implemented, created impact with that knowledge. Having said that, in Portugal, and I will just bring 3 examples of things that we are doing. So, for example, in order to conserve and protect our marine environment, we have developed marine protected areas, as many other countries. In fact, many of them are contributing to the Agenda 2030 in the ocean decade. So Portugal has at the moment a large Atlantic marine protected area. It is in the Madeira Islands. It's the Ilhas Selvagens Natural Reserve. For example, also in the Azores, there is the Blue Azores program. There is a partnership between public and private institutions, the government of the Azores, as well as the Wyatt Foundation and the Fundação Oceano Azul. So these three entities are working together to increase the percentage of marine protected areas in the Azores. Also, at the National Sea Strategy, it is one of the priority is the protection of these areas. So it's not only important to indicate that they exist, but we also need to implement actions that protect them effectively. And that is also a priority in our National Sea Strategy. In terms of FCT specifically, as a public funding agency, we fund not only marine research, but also many other scientific areas. But in terms of funds that are directed to the marine field, we fund research and innovation centers that are several in the Atlantic coast. I will only mention some. CIMAR, CIMA, CESAM are a few. We also fund research infrastructures, marine-related ones, and one of the examples is the Air Center, that it's a networking infrastructure promoting collaboration in the Atlantic Ocean. And we also support and recognize the title of collaborative laboratories, which is a very interesting instrument that links academia, research centers, and the industry, really promoting knowledge transfer from the academia to the industry. And one of these collaborative labs is the Plus Atlantic. So one laboratory that is specifically dedicated to Atlantic issues. And I think it's all for now, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Before moving to André, can you tell us a bit about your experience in the Anchor project, how it was to put, I will come back to that later, but how it was to put different science management community and also groups of researchers from different countries working together?
It was a challenge, I have to say. And it still is if I ask my colleagues here in the panel. But it's a very promising and interesting challenge. Yes, it's possible. It's possible, and I think since we have been working on that since 2013 with the Galway statement, now the Belém statement, and now from last July we have a new declaration, the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Declaration. So, and before we were only 3 countries, counting the European Commission has, European Union has a country, then plus other 3 countries, now in the south with the Belém statement, but now there are total of 8 countries considering the European Union a country. So from the north and the south of the Atlantic, really a truly all-Atlantic cooperation. There are many differences in cultures, many ways of looking to the same problem. So one thing that we did to address these different views was to develop working groups. There are working groups going on since 2013, more towards the issues on the North Atlantic. Since 2018, we have 2018-19, we have working groups, what we call platforms, going on in the South Atlantic. And these platforms have producing joint pilot actions. These pilot actions have been evolved from the discussions in these platforms. So different views, different perspectives, but all of them really contributing to the same goals, that is to connect people, act together, and cooperate for a same goal. And they are there. We have 6 joint pilot actions running, one on, well, the one that Anna has mentioned at the beginning, the Blue Schools Network, focusing on ocean literacy, one that is dedicating to capacity building and capacity development issues that Werner is here representing, one dedicated to data data standards and data sharing, and the need to have data archives that not only include biological data, but also human data and other types of data in a single place. One dedicated to aquaculture issue in order to develop an all-Atlantic aquaculture platform. One dedicated to microbiome, that it's working also with the projects here represented, is GPA Biotechmar, and least but not the least, with the one that is being coordinated by the Air Center and IFRAMER, that it's on sharing research and innovation infrastructures, which are crucial to observe the ocean and develop the solutions that we need. I think it's possible. It's challenging, but it's possible.
Thank you, Sofia. Well, André, you are, we can almost say that you are the leader, at least to our eyes, that across Europe, of an initiative that I think is an example in terms of gathering efforts of different research communities around the world. Tell us a little bit how it is to manage that on a daily basis, first of all, and give us some examples. Well, tell us what is the status of your own project and line of activity in terms of the Tara Ocean purpose, and give us some examples of successful, the most successful initiatives where you can say that our crews, our effort gave new knowledge to the world in this campaign.
So thank you, Telmo. Obrigado, Telmo. I would like just to thank Ciência Viva, FCT, and SPI, Sociedade Portuguesa de Inovação, and Sofia and Kaique for helping us to put in place this event. And thank you, Telmo. Obrigado por ter aceitado de moderar este debate. Yes, I'm very happy to be here. We are sorry the Tara boat is not just in the Marina das Nações because there's too much sand and we could not enter. So we are in Cascais, actually. And you're invited to visit the boat when you want this week there. And Tara, yeah, we are running this project since almost 20 years now. I joined Tara in 2010. And since then, we are working on this challenge, which is to share this complex science about microbiome. So when the Tara Ocean expedition started in 2008, a few people were familiar with the role of the planktonic ecosystem for climate, for instance. So we had a lot of way to popularize, to make plankton sexy, as we say, to make it simple. How to make it sexy for normal people, even for children, students, scholars, etc. And I think the foundation is doing a nice job on this challenge to share the science which is made on board. And I'm very happy to represent the policy department and to be the head of the international policy for Tara, because I think there's a huge gap between the scientific advances that were mentioned by Daniele. In a few years, we entered the sequencing stuff, big data analysis, machine learning, artificial intelligence, these new techniques that are step-by-step joining the ocean sciences, but the gap between this science and the policymakers is huge. And so I would just mention, when we started in France to create the Ocean and Climate Platform, which is one of the successful stories of Tara, we invited some scientists and stakeholders around the platform to put ocean and climate together in the perspective of the COP21 in Paris. And I remember the first time we talked with the IPCC representative, Jean Jouzel, à l'époque. What are you doing here? This is about climate, not about ocean. I mean, it was really fin de non-recevoir, comme on dit en français. It's not our business. It's not your business here. We are speaking about climate, not about ocean. And step by step, we created an ocean climate community giving inputs to the future Treaty of Paris. And so the world ocean is there. We have a working group now with stable in the UNFCCC, and we are still doing a lot of things with the platform to put the ocean in the climate agenda. And these gaps, I mean, it's from 2014 when we created the platform to now, where in the COP, in the last COPs, we have the ocean step by step entering. It's really the fruit, the result of a multi-stakeholder platform. We are more than 100 in the Ocean Climate Platform, and then it makes difference. We are different. The big NGOs like Conservation International, IUCN, Ocean Care, but there are also scientific institutions, CNRS, IFREMER, ATAR, and others, and small associations also, small NGOs that are working together to fill this gap. And I think it's quite important to realize that all these new techniques and this revolution the ocean sciences are living now, we are not prepared for that. I mean, the governments are not prepared for that. I just came back from New York some weeks ago, where we negotiated the BBNG agreement, and we are negotiating what will be the future of these protected areas in the high seas. What we will be protecting there, and we see a huge gap on the science there. The scientists that are invited to talk and to advise in the UN are scientists that are still representing a bit the old-fashioned oceanographic on dolphins and whales and sharks and coral reefs, but are not representing a vision on the ecosystem, ocean as a whole ecosystem, as we are entering now, which is possible now with this new data and this new integrating the ecology approach. So I think there's a really important gap to fill between the ocean sciences now and the processes we are defining. And again, for instance, we are going to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt in December to define new targets for the Ocean and Climate Nexus. We are going to define in the next COP15 of the CDB, which will be in Montreal, criteria for the 30 by 30 MPAs for tomorrow, and what will be the criteria for creating MPAs in 20 years, in 30 years. Of course, we have to go to climate criteria. We have to go to an ecosystem-based criteria to design the future MPAs, especially the high seas ones. What we are going to protect in the high seas, especially services provided by plankton and microbiome. And how to assess that, how to integrate that, is quite a big challenge. And just a last comment on some concrete challenges we are seeing with Tara in this South Atlantic cruise. We are just finishing a 2-year cruise with the pandemics. So we started in December 2020, so you can imagine, in the high year of the pandemics. Alejandro in Chile made all to welcome us in the middle of this situation. It was not easy, quarantine, etc. But we made it. We made it with dozens, and I say hundreds of people participating in each port call. We made a port call in Belém, where we worked with the federal universities there. We prepared it, and we had more than 100 scientists being involved on the port call, boarding in Tara, participating in the workshops we organized there. And so I think it's possible. And with a boat, and if it's a sailing boat, it's really interesting for youth also. I think we touch also the kids and the general public when we show the Atlantic with a boat, and we show it in a positive way. I mean, we know we are under threat, plastics are everywhere, climate change impacts are very hard to reverse, but we cannot be pessimistic. We cannot propose the ocean as a sad story, because it's not like that. I think the ocean is more resilient ecosystem we have on Earth, and we try to show the beauty of the ocean, the resilience of the ocean, the power of the ecosystem to restore also, and to have some approach that can bring interest from the society to the Atlantic. I think what is most important here is the all-Atlantic approach. I mean, when I was in Lisbon in 2017 when we launched the Belém Declaration in the Torre de Belém. We were invited with Daniele, and the words expressed by Sigi Gruber, by Carlos Moedas, by the President of Portugal also, in that occasion, were really inspiring for me. Build an Atlantic community together, and I think it's really important to show the beauty of the ocean and to tell the story to the kids and try to bring them on board in some way to give the real experience of the ocean. So we try to show, show living plankton, for instance, with an online microscope, which is really amazing, the curiosity, which you can visualize the plankton alive, and to make our best to include all kinds of public in our port calls when Tara arrives on. So I think this new enchantment, sorry for my English, of the ocean is quite important, because the green ecology is often punitive, as we say in France. And it's a matter of being to protect the forest. So we cannot do this, we cannot do that. And the ocean, I think the ocean is huge. The ocean is around us, so it's us. So it's really, for us, an opportunity to make more integrated vision and to bring people on board, not only scientists.
Well, let me just to add into that, and throughout your travelings around the world, you have that advantage because you are always in contact with different realities, countries, and with different communities, researchers, policies. Do you think the political classes around the world are already aware of the urgency of this approach, of an ecosystem approach to manage the ocean?
I think we have some progress since 10 years, but definitely I don't think that the decision makers are informed enough. With some exceptions. For instance, when we were in Chile, the ambassador for the ocean came to our conference, and it was the first time he was hearing about plankton. An ambassador of the ocean. And in the same way, when we are negotiating the high seas, the experts that are defining a treaty that will be mandatory and that will regulate all the research in the high seas for the next decades. They don't know what is microbiome. They don't know the distinction, for instance, between the DNA extraction and the sequencing. They are not aware about what things are concretely. So I think we have a lot to do to inform decision makers. And we know the ocean is complex. The ecology, as these guys are presenting, is a complex issue, but we need to move forward to better inform decision makers about the challenges we have.
Thank you, André. I go to Werner now, that is remote. Hi, Werner. Are you listening well?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome to our conversation here. Sometimes we have the feeling that you are not, but you are. Werner, a little bit like I asked Daniel, having in mind this approach even that André mentioned on the urgent need to adopt and fully push for an ecosystem approach management of our oceans. Can you tell us why in your daily work, and how you would explain also this urgency to our common people and societies, and especially to the policymakers that we have to convince, and give us a little bit some examples on how your projects and initiatives are contributing to put this as an urgent topic in the agenda of education, of policy, and even besides policy, politics also.
Yeah, thank you, Telmo, for that question, and also for inviting me. Well, I'm a fisheries biologist, so we are working with ecosystem approach for fisheries, for management, since decades. And you can see, and I agree with the former speaker, it hasn't really reached the policymakers and the and many administrators. However, I see some progress. There are many people that are really interested or aware of this need. Ecosystem approach means that we do not just look at plankton, fish, and maybe mammals or so, that we really look in a holistic way, what are we taking, what do we want from the ecosystem? The resources we want to exploit, that is clear. We want to get the fisheries, the fish. We want to have other resources from the sea, but how should we do that in a sustainable way? And the only way is really to do that in a holistic way, including all different areas of users and researchers, and then find a compromise. How can we really do that in a sustainable way? And let me then give some comments on the Anchor project. We here at ZMT, we have led 2 of the work packages, one of data standardization of data, and one on capacity development. And I think that, both things are really crucial if we want to come to a real ecosystem approach for management of the Atlantic Ocean. We have to use the same methods in science, in research. It cannot be that one country or one researcher does the measurements in this way and the other one in other way, in other units, etc. So we need common standards to produce the data so that we can really use them Atlantic-wide. And how can we come to that stage that we really use same methods, same standards, same data? We need capacity development all over. And this is not just something which is addressed to the so-called developing countries. It is also something that we have to apply to the developed countries. We have to find ways to some common standards, some common methods, so that we can work together and everybody can contribute, because it's a huge task, this management of the Atlantic Ocean. Let me, just 3. Sophia has already mentioned that we had in the Anchor project several joint pilot actions, some projects to develop the ideas that we have discussed in the Anchor project. One crucial thing was really coordination in capacity development measures. So there is so much going on in the world, and also in the Atlantic region, but nobody knows what the other is doing. So you come to a country and say, okay, let's do this or that training, for example, and they will tell you, yeah, but there is 1 month before, 1 year before, there was another group coming and offering the same. Yeah, and sometimes there's competition between different activities, which is, to my mind, mostly wasting money, we could use the money, the expertise, the experts much better, much more efficient if we would really coordinate these activities, and this on an Atlantic scale and not just on bilateral scales. Another thing that another topic that we identified and that Luis Pinheiro is organizing, for example, training on research vessels, so-called floating universities. Research vessels we know are very expensive. So if we want to have it also in an effective way, if we want to use them in an effective way, we also need somehow to coordinate that. And we should know, all of us should know what is going on and what are the possibilities and the needs. The same with, and so this is something that we think is really, one of the main things. And then when you have that, you also need capacity development, not only in the scientific community, you need it in the societal groups, let me say that. Capacity development, as we understand it today, is not just training of students or pupils, it is training on different levels. On individual level, that's what we do in summer schools or whatever at the universities. On institutional level, so we need to train or to do capacity development, to educate, if you want, people how to run on institutions, etc., what they should do. And this goes up to societal level, where then the administrations, the lawmaking units, institutions are involved, etc. So it's the whole humanity that has to be trained and brought up to the same level. And then we hopefully may succeed in applying an ecosystem approach to management of the Atlantic Ocean. If we do not include all these levels, all groups, it will be difficult in the future. And this is what, in either in the Anchor project, but also in many others. You mentioned some traffic is, for example, a research project, a scientific project, where we really want to understand what are the reasons for the failure of sardine recruitment in an upwelling area. We have another EU-funded project, Triatlas, which compares the structure of the ecosystems in Southeast Atlantic, of West Africa, and on the other side of the Atlantic in Brazil, to understand what is driving the changes, the variability in these ecosystems. And we need this understanding, similar to the other sister projects, so-called sister project of the Horizon 2020 program, like Atlant-Eco, or whatever they are called. And they are all contributing to this holistic knowledge that we need. But we need also then to come into the policy society. We need this contact, this bridging from science into policy, so that the politicians understand what they have to decide.
Thank you, Werner. I'll come back to you later, but because you mentioned something that I memorized, that is lack of coordination. And I would like to pass to José Moutinho on that, because in fact, the Air Center is a coordination organization, and is playing the role of coordination a lot. So my question to you, José, is the challenges, particularly in the knowledge and management of marine ecosystems facing us today, are not the kind that can be addressed by any single entity. Therefore, the collaborations that you are involved in, like the joint pilot actions in Marinette, are extremely important. Could you share with us how this idea initiative was developed and the success you were able to achieve so far and the challenges you face moving forward?
Okay, thank you for the question and also for the invitation. I will build upon, some of the answers that people already gave over here. About, the need of collaboration. We don't know exactly who is doing what. So I will start with a very simple history. In the very first meeting we had on the AA Marinette, that stands for the All-Atlantic Marine Research Network, that's actually the network of networks. This is very important. We were on the very first meeting discussing, somebody from the Lamont Doherty laboratory from Columbia University asked, "Are you going to Cape Verde?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, I need you to collect some sargassum." And on the very first meeting, I said, so they sent by FedEx. The protocol of the equipment needed, it arrived on the morning of that the ship left Portugal to go to Cape Verde. It was an oceanographic vessel from the Hydrographic Institute of Portugal. And actually, they collected a lot of new information, new data about sargassum. For the first time was spotted some huge sargassum mats just in front of Cape Verde, in front of the port of I can't remember, Praia. Sorry, it was Praia. So it was very interesting. So this really is an example of Werner just said, we don't know exactly who is doing what, where, when, how, and why. So the whole idea of the Marinette network, it's for us to share some of this information. So this project, this pilot action, is divided in 3 different areas. The first one is to create a community of operators and managers of marine research infrastructures that could collaborate and develop common guidelines for transnational access to all these infrastructures. And these guidelines will be built upon one of the second part of this project, that is the ship time sharing pilot project. This is one that the Hydrographic Institute sent to Cabo Verde, and we tested how could we share this infrastructure, but even more important, we tested the main output of these Marinette. That's a portal where you can share everything that you're doing in the sea. So basically, will be a map where you can interactively say, listen, my glider will do this line. The area of coverage of my ship will be this one. That will be doing. These are the kind of sensors that we have. These are the kind of activities. And then you can look what they are doing and try to collaborate, contact, and say, well, good. Can you bring, some equipment? Can you invite somebody from our research institution? So this is the whole idea, to promote this active collaboration among researchers and research organizations. And the third part of the project is even more interesting, is some pilot actions related to plankton imaging. I got completely addicted to this plankton imaging. You know, Rubens is over there. You know, it's really interesting. So the idea is to share, ideas, technologies, and ways of collaboration within the plankton imaging community. The other one is CoastNet, that is trying to put together several ocean observation infrastructures, discussing together, going back to what Werner said, to define standards, define protocols of collaboration and sharing data. And then the third one is linking up both poles in terms of polar research. So we did a very interesting workshop in Washington during the All-Atlantic Coast Research Alliance last July. And it was a day full of, presentations and discussion on how they can link up these 2 communities to discuss together common challenges, common opportunities to research. So, so basically, the main output that we have right now is have several very active communities working together and providing a lot of different ways of output, not only workshop, but also, I mean, courses. We will have a course now in Argentina to teach young students, I mean, and young researchers, how to work with marine robotics and other kinds of observation. So this is the kind of a collaboration framework that we are creating within the ANCOR, within the All-Atlantic Coast Research Alliance, that, I mean, we want to become a long-term dialogue structure for the future where people can participate and exchange ideas and also share information, data, and most important, their research infrastructures.
Thank you, José. Still on cooperation and coordination, I go to Susana Catita, and my question, Susana, because you are leading an initiative that is an international one in the scope of the United Nations system. So my question is, when we talk about science and the oceans, we talk about doing research in a very hard environment for humans. Doing research in the oceanic hydrosphere requires a lot of money, a lot of training and specialized resources so that societies and countries may have the necessary or even sufficient scientific knowledge to inform the public policies about the ocean. How do you see the role of your initiative in this process of training and building the necessary technical and intellectual capacity for this purpose?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you also for the question, and also for the notes that have been given by my colleagues here in the panel. We surely learn a lot with these conversations, these debates. But let me frame you a little bit for those who don't know Ciência LP Center, well, Science, Ciência in Portuguese, and LP for Portuguese language. And we are a Category 2 center under the auspices of UNESCO. This was agreed between the Portuguese government and UNESCO in order to create a center that would strengthen academic cooperation through advanced formation, but also scientific development among Portuguese-speaking countries. And we work basically in this context, in this framework, strengthening academic and scientific cooperation within the Portuguese-speaking countries. And when we talk about Portuguese-speaking countries, we see that all of them, all the 9 countries that are included in the community of Portuguese-speaking countries have borders with the ocean. Well, only 2 of them don't have with the Atlantic Ocean, because we have Timor, which is in East Asia, and Mozambique, who has the Indic Ocean. But all the other countries are bordered by the Atlantic. So in this context of having an all-Atlantic alliance, it is very important to engage researchers from all countries. And the problem is, how can we contribute for that? CSLP, how can this contribute for that? How can the world contribute for that is the most important question, not CSLP with just a grain in this. But I would like very much to show you a picture that I have here. I've forgotten to give, but as I cannot show you, I'll talk about this picture. This is a planisphere of the world with all the countries. And it shows in colors, in blue colors, the number of researchers per million of inhabitants. And all the blue is the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, you have some shades of blue. Well, you have Australia and New Zealand, of course, but let's forget that. Let's forget that they belong to the rest of the world. They are a specific ecosystem. And the blue is, in the southern hemisphere, is mainly on Chile, Argentina, and South Africa. So basically, the number of researchers per million inhabitants in Africa and Latin America is very, very short. And the Atlantic is all Atlantic, from pole to pole. So we need to engage these researchers. And mainly, we have to have researchers. We need to train people. We have to provide them with the skills to be able to research. So That's the role of CNCLP. That's the role of cooperation among countries. And that's the role also of the actual researchers that perform research in the Atlantic. Because we have seen here, and I'm very much interested about that, we have networks of networks, a lot of networks that don't talk to each other. And this is very important. These networks need to have, I wouldn't say coordinate, it's like with coordinating the internet. We cannot have a coordinator for the networks, but we need to engage networks to talk to each other. We know that they exist. I know a lot of networks. You all know a lot of networks. But do we talk with them? We need to engage them. And I think that is our role, not CNCLP role. We have a small part on that. We are doing our job. We are connecting networks. We are providing advanced training. We are stimulating scientific development. But are we sure that the networks I know talk with the networks you know or you know? No, I'm not sure. Am I doing enough for that? No, I'm not doing enough. So blame on me also. But it's something we all need to change. Because as we are aware of an initiative, and we know somebody who is doing a similar initiative, either in the geographic context, either in the scientific context, we need to put them together. What José mentioned here about Colombia, he needs to have a sample of sargassum from Cape Verde. That's how we must work. How many times, ask yourselves, how many times have we come into an information that I say, oh, I should send this to Angola because I know a researcher there that is involved in this area. Did I do it? No, I didn't. So I think this is the big challenge. The aim of this panel is what challenges do we have? The main challenge we have in the Atlantic area, but also in all the world, is to connect people. We have all the way to do this. We have the means, we have technology, we have everything. But it's humans that are pushing the button of connection. So the role of CNCLP is to bring awareness to all of us, but also to ourselves, that we need to connect and we have to put researchers together. We need to have Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa, also Brazil, involved, engaged in this All Atlantic initiative. Do I see them among the countries that are engaged? No, I don't see them. So please use us to engage these people. We will do our jobs, but please count on us. And that's the way I need to work. And that's the way we all need to work to this big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. I think we are already established here some networks, and that's good. So we have one more network to count to the All Atlantic. By the way, do you have already some examples of marine cooperation in the scope of your CNCLP?
Well, CNCLP works in what concerns advanced training. We are a center that is founded. It's under the auspices of UNESCO, but it's founded by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. And one of our main goals is to allow, to provide advanced formation to Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. We have focused on Africa for this. And we work with consortia of universities. And we have consortia in several areas: engineering, agriculture, biodiversity. In the health ecosystem, we have 2 consortia. But we have created in 2022 a new consortia in ocean sciences. So within this specific scientific area, but not forgetting the coordination of all the areas, because we have engineering for technology in ocean technologies, but we also have biodiversity to study the ecosystems in the marine systems. So it's a new consortium. We are starting now, but we will have soon some news in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Having in mind that working in the ocean is naturally a difficult and expensive endeavor, and although you are a mathematician, what do you think are the present difficulties in studying the marine ecosystems? Well, lack of researchers, as Susanna was saying, that we need to train more and connect them in international networks, technology, equipments, heavy equipments like research vessels or supercomputing to analyze all the data that is being collected by the TAR expedition, the data itself, an overall funding, or just a little bit like Werner was saying, organization and coordination? What is your feeling about it?
So first, thanks for the invitation too. I'm a Pacific mathematician, or mathematician from the Pacific Ocean, so thanks you for the connectivity that you're trying to do here. Just to say that, to present myself, I was one of the two coordinators of Mission Microbiome in Chile, so was one oceanographer and one mathematician, Camila Fernandez from Concepcion. So I start with this because maybe what I want to say in the difficulties that maybe all the previous that you said, of course, more the regulations also of the ocean, the way you interact with the countries is a quite difficult problem in Chile in particular. I was surprised because this is my first expedition, maybe the last, I don't know, no, not the last. And so my first feeling was that my colleagues from oceanography are kind of, survivals of our regulations, yes? Because was almost, we were discussing during the lunch that we almost destroyed Tara because of regulations, yes? The boat, yes? Because the Marines from Chile went into the boat and they did a lot of mistakes, yes, in Punta Arenas. So this is a very important issue, and all others you mentioned, but I think from my perspective of mathematician, and since I'm working with biologists for the last 20 years, doing also mathematics, I think that we never speak about real transdisciplinary areas, and this problem is not a problem from the ocean only. Yes, maybe there's no mathematics to solve the problems. It's not a problem of just considering a complex problem and say, okay, there's some statistical tool here, a lot of artificial intelligence today. But this is true. We need to use that, and we need to address many problems with these new tools. But I think this is not the point, I think. And this expedition in Chile and the other one in the Atlantic Ocean, I think that opened a way to think science in another way. So it's not only coordination of countries and people, I think it's coordination of sciences. I think transdisciplinary is important because you don't put a hierarchy in science. I think, and this is important for the ocean. The problem is of humanity, I don't know. So you need to put many other actors from the beginning, and just also to motivate. I don't believe that you can train, I don't know, a biologist with a deep, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe it exists. I will not say that. Maybe it doesn't exist. Always exists some marvelous people, yes, humanities like that. But in average, it will be very complicated to have someone thinking about deep mathematics together with an oceanographer, with deep oceanography, deep biology together. So we need to do science in another way. I think this is an opportunity today. It's not only the coordination of people, countries, that is already so difficult, but it's another layer of difficulty for me, is that we need to speak in another way among sciences, yes? It's not a matter of simulating the ocean. It's already complicated, so we will maybe, oceanographer, physical oceanographer will speak about Navier-Stokes, I don't know, Kolmogorov equations, yes? But maybe we cannot simulate, yes? But we will, it's like genomics, I don't know, 20 years ago, so I remember my colleagues from biology giving a bacteria to a student and asking him or her to sequence and analyze, and they spent 2 years just sequencing. Yeah? What that means? Yes? No sense. Yes? You can go give to a professional what a professional do, and you continue much faster because there's an urgency today for the ocean, the climate. So this will be my point, in fact. What is the most difficult part? Understanding that everything that you said before is so difficult. Yes? That coordinating another way sciences is so important today. I think also to motivate people. Yes, this is I fail in that. I have never motivated a lot of mathematicians to do what I am doing. And I think I fail. And maybe we fail in our center, this Center for Genome Regulation. We are the same name as Barcelona. I know that this is a bad name, but anyway, CRG. We are people from plant biology, ocean, I don't know, human genomics and mathematicians, but very few mathematicians. And the main point is that it's complicated to discuss among science. Yes, and I think this is the very big intuition from Eric Arsent in Tara. Why I am involved in Tara? Because I met him in Easter Island many years ago, because Chilean regulation, by the way. So because Tara was not able to stop in Easter Island, yes? So they invite me as a kind of moderator. And Eric, I think he's a scientist from another century. So it's more like a physicist at the end of 19th century, thinking about entropy and statistical mechanics and trying to see how big invariants will solve many things. And the conclusion was in the 50s, all what we discovered, yes, and even telecommunication, many things arise from that. So I think his inspiration and his intuition, I think, is what I think we can transform with this expedition among the way we do science.
Thank you, Alejandro. My question is, do you consider yourself an ocean mathematician?
An ocean mathematician?
Yeah.
No, I'm just a Pacific.
I hope so.
I am a Pacific mathematician, yes.
Okay. Patricio, go back to you. We heard about from a mathematician perspective. Now I would like to make you the same question from a technologue perspective. And we know that technology, one of the, in my opinion at least, one of the outcomes of the last years in the ocean sciences was the connection between biology, marine geology with the technology. So we have here a community that since the 90s started to work together, and I believe that is one of the successes that is behind the fact that ocean sciences are growing faster and faster. But my question is the same, that having in mind your experience working in ocean affairs, what you still consider to be the most difficult thing to continue to do science on the oceans? Is the lack of researchers, still few researchers, more interdisciplinarity as Alessandro was saying? And it was a well-raised point. Lack of technology, lack of research platforms, data, funding, or it's a matter of organization and collaboration?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think, it's a bit of everything of what you said, indeed. And there are maybe some of them that could be priority. I think the coordination of effort, especially for what concerns expensive infrastructures for observing the ocean, I think that should be a priority for everyone. And I think these research alliances, they can fulfill that. They can facilitate the use of shared infrastructure. They can also try to agree on common research questions. And I agree also with the role of interdisciplinary work. That's an element that, in some culture maybe is very present, in other cultures is less so. And the Atlantic in its own, it's actually very diverse. There are very different needs and very different questions, also research questions. So maybe methods to, in a way, have a coordination effort or sort of understanding what the needs are and try to coordinate a little bit, especially in terms of observations. I think that's fundamental. but also keeping some diversity in the way different communities would like to approach the questions that they have. We have been mentioning before, like the sargassum as a case, which is relevant for some community, extremely important, also for the whole Atlantic in terms of dynamics. But there are regions that maybe might be more interested in the way upwelling systems are working, what type of effects they have on fishery, and so forth and so on. So this diversity of questions can indeed be addressed with large-scale projects, like, I mean, one of the ones that I'm coordinating, which is an instrument, and I think it's actually a valid instrument. These flagship research alliances that has been set by the European Commission. I think it's a way to address some of these issues. Another approach could be even to boost it and keep this diversity in the science community and in the science questions as an element of, as an advantage to address some of these challenges. So, for example, having mechanisms where small groups maybe can get together and address specific questions on advancing knowledge on specific elements. That could be one way of doing that. Or in terms of technologies, I mean, of course, we know all the values of remote sensing approaches or gliders and autonomous underwater vehicles. They can provide a lot of knowledge on things that we don't know yet. But they're also quite expensive in terms of devices. And there are communities that maybe they can advance a lot just having a way of data logging that is more automatized. So how can we combine all these needs and effort in funding mechanisms that can support, from one side, the need of coordination, on the other side, reflect the needs of the local communities? I think that's an interesting question that we should reflect upon and see if those instruments can actually be implemented, and we can maybe discuss the way they should be implemented and designed together.
Thank you, Patricio. Well, I think I will give the opportunity in the final round on a short, in 2 minutes. I'll give the opportunity to each one of you to tell us, if you had to choose one, what you would like to focus as the main thing that is still missing to engage, an all-Atlantic community. If you would like to make a lobby now for the policy guys to implement something, what would be your request?
Okay, we start very briefly during the experience with Atlantigo, with these mission microbiomes all around the Atlantic, South Atlantic countries. We saw a huge heterogeneity in the societal, but also in the science and the infrastructure. So, indeed, if we want to address training, as Werner said, we need to have a deeper understanding of the situation in different countries. And when we design projects or programs, we should include and have a better understanding through gap analysis, for instance, of why there is this heterogeneity and how we can address that. And this also means, for instance, when we try to export our approach to monitoring the ocean, we realized in many cases it was too expensive. So we have to redesign also the way we monitor the ocean, because we cannot simply export things from Europe. Concepts, questions, scientific questions, and even the tools. So my big suggestion is, let's design the programs and collaborations together, really, seriously. And I regret, for instance, when I wrote the project, I didn't really know. I didn't have an understanding of that. I really regret about that. And also the point is programs and not only projects. Short-term projects are okay, but we need long-term programs and collaborations on infrastructure development. Also because, and I stop here, another thing we realized is that, for instance, Europe was very good in organizing European infrastructures, okay, like EMBRC for biology. We don't have the same in Africa or in South America, and actually we realized that it would be great to have these kind of regional levels, which are in between single countries and the global level, which will ease the local dissemination in this. So those are my lessons learned. Yeah.
Thank you. Sophia, from your perspective.
So I would go on the same direction that Danielle. I think in order to promote an all-Atlantic, and here the word is all, in order all of us, from the north to the south, west to east, collaborate effectively, we really need to have the same capacities in all countries. And by capacities, I mean technicians, I mean researchers, I mean infrastructures, and I also mean data standards. So this would be my request, to have same capacities across and along the Atlantic Ocean.
André, your ocean Christmas wish.
I would speak on behalf of a research vessel facing numerous difficulties to go to the countries. Actually, you cannot imagine the burdens we have as a research vessel to go to a different country and to make research on a country. There's a heavy process to having the permits. The compliance process now with the Nagoya Treaty being ratified is being heavier and heavier, and researchers are not prepared for that charge of compliance reports imposed by Nagoya. And so I would love if when we launch an H2020 H Europe program, Europe could lead also a dialogue on high level basis with ministries, with legal affairs on the ministries of research of these southern countries to create a spirit of collaboration, because it's not the case actually. We are trying to give material, and the taxes to import in Brazil, for instance, is just nightmare to send. We are sending it in our suitcases, and Rubens, when you go to Brazil, we bring the stuff because we cannot send it.
Don't record that, yeah.
But it's almost like that. I mean, we need to pass through the lines because the policy is not built on this sense. We have heavy taxes for equipment. We have a heavy process of compliance and permits to go to the waters. And even when we go to a country like Chile, when we collaborate since 10 years, the Navy in Chile almost killed Tara, as Alejandro said. It's not a joke. I mean, and we paid like 150,000 euros to be in Chile. So I will really dream that the countries could talk about that in a high level, because it goes always to the Navy. And when it goes to the Navy, even in South Africa, it's the same thing. It's kind of very heavy discussions, and the politicians are not there to say, yes, guys, go to real cooperation. So it's a big challenge from Tyra perspective.
Thank you, André. Werner, what would be your main wish to definitely implement an all-Atlantic ocean community, ocean science community?
Well, I think what is really needed is that the different institutions talk to each other. I mean, we have the IOC, and you mentioned my membership in the group of experts for capacity development strategy. So we have many of these elements that we have discussed today. We have also in the IOC. But the IOC is relying on funding from the member states, from the member countries, which is in many cases not really, well equipped. So I would really like, from the EU, from the Commission, for example, a well-funded, well-structured institution or a group that does all or coordinates all what we have discussed today. And this is not just training, it's capacity development as such in general. And that is all including everything, instrumentation, administration, etc. What I think Yeah, just to give one comment to my speaker. The problem with Nagoya is, well, that's the fault of the industrialized countries that and the developing countries had very bad experience with all this, genetic or other stuff, because that's also a very important economic issue for many, enterprises. The genetic information, etc., is of enormous value. So we should, we should build forms. We should build kind of a platforms. We have this. Proposed that to the Commission, and I'm quite hopeful that the Commission will act on that. A platform that can really deal Atlantic-wide with such questions and stimulate cooperation and collaboration in the different parts on all levels, not just on one, not just on summer schools or so. It really has to go beyond that. It has to include everything. And it could be an instrument for the All-Atlantic Science Community or Alliance to really establish an Atlantic-wide sustainable science.
Thank you, Werner. José.
Well, we have a huge wish list. More technology, more money, more coordination.
Choose one, choose one.
Less regulation, more coordination. You know, I would go in a completely different way. You know, I prefer to say, to paraphrase what John Fitzgerald Kennedy once said, don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. What I mean is, the scientists fail badly on showing the benefits of science. This is the main point. We are talking about policy forum here. So the only way to get more technology, more data, less regulation, more coordinations, is to show the social benefit of what they are doing. And in general, the scientists and the engineers are failing badly on that, you know. And it's not, I'm not saying that what they do in terms of research doesn't have an impact, but they do not communicate. They cannot show the benefits of what they do into society at large, and especially to policymakers and decision makers. So I would go in a completely different, I really would like very much for the scientists to, every time they're doing something, to clearly show the benefits what they are doing for society. It'd be much easier to get all that, you know. And on the contrary, instead of asking for the policymakers, they would come after the scientists and say, listen, your returns on votes is unbelievable. Get more money, do more science.
Thank you. Well, I agree with that approach, but I'm not here to comment on that. Susanna, what would be your...
skip me because José stole my line, which is good. Which is good because it shows the strength of this idea. And since this is a science to policy debate, and policy goes to politicians, but also to society. So it is very important that scientists, researchers, and academic communities learn how to talk to these people. It is very nice. I'm not a scientist, despite my training, academic training, but I love to see these presentations, these charts, but I'm not an example. Maybe if I was a politician, I wouldn't understand anything, and I wouldn't make any effort to understand it. So scientists need to learn how to communicate, how to show the impact of their research. Why should that research be funded? By whom? By governments, by private society, by private companies. They need to learn how to talk to these people. And these people have a different speech. It's not an academic speech, it's not a scientific speech. It's a basic speech. Also the society, they need to know the impact of the research. Why do a citizen for Cape Verde understands that some guy from Colombia needs a sargassum from their land. Does anybody care to explain them how important it is? Or they just say, okay, we have a protocol, we collect the sargasso, we send it to Colombia. But why? What for? What is my benefit as a Cape Verdean for that exchange? So I keep on saying this for many years. Scientists have a very close and hermetic conversation. They need to open it. They need to learn other languages, how to talk to politicians, how to communicate with society. Somebody from, and people that works in agriculture in São Tomé e Príncipe, they barely speak Portuguese, despite they are in a Portuguese-speaking country. They have their own dialects. How do they understand the importance of the research? How do they understand that their government is taking money away from their food, their infrastructures, to give it to researchers? But if they do understand, probably they will be the ones pushing the governments to give more money to research. So it's all about communication. Thank you, Zé. You stole my line, but I completely agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. Alejandro, besides besides the wish of more interdisciplinarity, more transdisciplinarity, another one.
I think two. First, multilaterality in a real way. That means that, so when we collaborate with France, I am more in this direction, we are bilateral. That means that we have the same standards, we have the same machines, we have, and I think we speak about big projects. I'm from the Pacific, maybe in Atlantic is different. But we don't practice multilaterality in a deep way. This is my first thought. That means that it's kind of, it's a river, from Amazonia maybe, but from Europe to some place. I think this will not solve the problems. And the other one is a change in culture in the sense that I said before, but also I think that it's not a matter of science to politicians. I think it's much more complex. I think we need to establish dialogues. We need to learn how to listen to scientists too. I think we cannot put in any problem, I think, but this I'm speaking as scientists, the weight part, the heavy part in one side. I think this is just like a couple, yes? I cannot say that I am the bad guy, I am the bad father, and you are the good mother, I think. I think it's much complicated, and I think it's an issue that we have to address. So I agree that we don't know how to speak, but I think the listening is not very good too. It's really materialist listening. So I think it's a complex problem, like the ecological way we try to see the ocean. And it's a simplification. I think, I don't know, our country I am back from my PhD, 30 years ago, is the same for 30 years. And we make real efforts. But a complicated problem, you need to put in the correct, I don't know, way to explain. You cannot explain the so simple problem because society needs to know that it is complex. Yes? And maybe this is the problem for scientists to communicate because we know it's complex and we want to communicate the complexity. And maybe this is a mistake. And on the other side, we need to be prepared to listen. I think this is an organizational issue like the ocean. So I agree with you, but I think it's not one-directional. If problems are one-directional, are easy to solve, and this is a complicated problem.
Thank you. It's always good to have the two sides of a coin. And I will end with Patricio. Tell me, what would be your most strong push to convey as a message to be able to make true the dream of an all-Atlantic scientific community for the ocean?
Yeah, I think, if you want to build and boost an all-Atlantic community, we have to keep the networking part active and alive. And all the instruments that have been discussed here in terms of summer schools and workshops, common training, reduction of fragmentations, but also maybe medium-term mobility programs. That could also help to exchange knowledge and expertise across different countries. To make a network, we need to have face-to-face meetings as much as possible, in a sense, and exchange knowledge and experiences. We had in the past in Europe this European networks of excellence that I think was a good exercise to bring together the European community across different topics. Maybe it's an experience that we can reproduce in the Atlantic.
Thank you, Patricio. I think we have, you want, go ahead.
Can I just, no,
you can add, you have 1 minute to add.
Just to react to this, yeah. No, just, I like your point, Jose, and just quick reaction is that you're right, but we should also, in that case, change the career of a scientist, because it's becoming a nightmare to become a scientist too, you know, and it's difficult to have a position, and you have to move, low salaries, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to pick up one single point here, is that publishing, right? Publishing is incredibly expensive. So even if now we have open access and open science, but we are transferring the problem into rising the cost of paying, you know, for publishing, which is another problem we have to deal with in this all-Atlantic collaboration, right? So basically, we are small businessmen or women that we have to provide a budget every year because you have to keep the group working with politicians, publishing, etc., etc. So, and I think we need the change, but I seriously agree with you. But to do that, to be able to have energies and scope to discuss with politicians and outreach and people, we should change the careers, and not only in Europe, but everywhere. I mean, it's an important, and publishing is one example. We publish for free on Nature, but you have to pay 11,000 euros to publish one paper, okay? So it's not the solution, right? So it's not this, the open science, so it's an example. Sorry.
Yes, it's not, that's not for me, I have mine. I think it's, that's a very interesting question, and it's not easy to overcome where a researcher, how can a researcher manage his own career on a personal basis and being a relevant societal actor. Sometimes it's not an easy task to combine the two, but we need you to do that. So you will have to find a way. Ask support to do it, but you will have to do it. Because it's what will be relevant for the profession itself.
I understand.
Well, this is my final comment as a moderator. I would like to ask a round of applause to all these people. I think they gave a wonderful contribution. Thank you, Werner and Patricio online. You were great, and now I'll pass it to you. Let's go there, and we'll continue with Martha.
Thank you, Telmo, for the excellent questions and for the moderation. And thank you all participants for this very interesting and rich session that gathered a diversified and experienced group of Atlantic stakeholders, each with a specific knowledge and approach towards the Atlantic Ocean, that provided us with insight, thoughts, and ideas on ways to move forward for sustainable use of the Atlantic marine ecosystems. Thank you. And now we are approaching the end of this event, and it's my pleasure to invite Orlando Costa, who is the Head of Cooperation Unit of DGPM, Directorate General for Maritime Policy in Portugal, to come to the stage. Oh, well.
Well, after a pleasant panel, well moderated by Telmo, it's up to me to close this session. And on behalf of Directorate General for Maritime Policy, I would like to thank Foundation for Science and Technology and Ciência Viva for the kind invitation to close this event. During this session, we had the opportunity to listen to several speakers, several points of views, different experience, different geographies, but all with a common focus, the Atlantic. I had also heard three special words: coordination, cooperation and collaborative. And this is a pleasant session. Regarding Portugal in 2021, Portugal adopted its third National Ocean Strategy, which emphasizes on the importance of scientific knowledge, on the protection of the ocean, on the strength of traditional and emerging sectors of blue economy, the valorization of marine ecosystem service, and the recognition of their role as vectors of sustainable development. The National Ocean Strategy has 10 strategic goals and 13 priority intervention areas. I will enhance the first priority intervention area, which is science and innovation. Strategic decisions are worthless if unsupported by science, evidence, and data. The development of a sustainable blue economy, the safeguard and restoration of maritime and marine ecosystems are built on a solid knowledge. The strategy, the National Ocean Strategy, highlights 30 flagship sections, and regarding science and innovation, the flagship actions are: first, to implement a national program for the observation, high-resolution mapping, and knowledge of the deep sea in the exclusive economic zone and the extended continental shelf. Second, to promote a multidisciplinary RD&I financing program for ocean sciences involving the Portuguese scientific and technological system and the industry for the development of innovative goods and services in the blue economy. Third, to develop technology and to promote surveys to assess the environmental, social, and economic impacts of deep-sea mining. The National Ocean Strategy enhances the relationship between Portugal and the Atlantic, and this must be effective to consolidate and strengthen cooperation with other countries in this area. The strategy is an instrument to continue the cooperation in the Atlantic Basin under the umbrella of the Atlantic International Research Center, Air Center, and the Belém Declaration. Very briefly, I would like to enhance the Atlantic Action Plan 2.0 of the European Union Atlantic Maritime Strategy. The action plan, includes 4 pillars, which are integrally interconnected and trans-regional by nature. The research activities implemented as part of the Galway and Belém Statement and the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance cut across all pillars. They give an international dimension to the action plan and support its implementation by improving understanding of the changing Atlantic Ocean and its effects on coastal communities and by developing innovative solutions. The pillars focus on issues that one coastal region and one single state cannot solve alone, or where it is more efficient to act, cannot solve alone, or where it is more efficient to act together and deliver on challenges that matter in the daily lives of people living in coastal areas. One final remark, remembering that Lisbon held the United Nations Ocean Conference a few months ago, co-organized by Portugal and Kenya. Regarding the Interactive Dialogue 6, increasing scientific knowledge and developing research capacity and transfer of marine technology, Portugal advocated the establishment of partnerships between research centers and centers of engineering and developing systems, combining robotics and new technologies. Good examples in this regard could be the Air Center, an international non-profit organization for the development of scientific and technological applications in the Atlantic region to promote the creation of highly qualified jobs, paying special attention to the study of ocean-space interactions and the development of sustainability solutions using Earth observation from the space. Another example are CoLab, laboratórios colaborativos, non-profit organizations, non-profit private organizations and collaborative platforms between research and industry, joining companies, R&D units and higher education institutions stemming from technological interface centers. Thus, scientific multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral cooperation is key to contribute to a better understanding of such a complex environment. Once again, thank you for the invitation to the GPM close this event. It was a very nice afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Orlando. And now it is time to close the event. Thanks to all of you that have made possible the organization of this event in such a short notice, showing the motivation of the community to be together and to work together. Once again, I would like to thank Ciência Viva for the nice facilities, and I say goodbye to all of you. Let's keep in touch and let's keep working together as a community. Goodbye.